Joining us now live from Boston is Nicholas Burns, Professor of the Practice of Diplomacy and International Politics at the Harvard Kennedy School. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here on Al Jazeera. Ambassador, we could start first with your reaction to the events on Tuesday, the storming of the U.S. Embassy in Cairo and the Libyan consulate, and the killing of Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans.
Well, it's been a tragic week for the United States, for the loss of Ambassador Stevens, for the loss of our other colleagues in the American embassy in Tripoli and the consulate in Benghazi. It's very shocking for Americans to see these images and to know that that our embassies have been attacked. I must say, I think it's very important now that the Libyan government and the Egyptian government stand up, protect our embassies and consulates. They have a legal obligation to do under the Vienna Convention. They have a moral obligation to do that as well. And we hope very much that these governments will have the fortitude, the strength, the courage to stand up against violent extremism, because that's a threat to their own societies, not just a threat to foreign embassies and foreign consulates. I would also say this. It's obvious that both in Yemen and in Libya and in Egypt, you have relatively moderate governments under attack by extremist elements. So we understand that part of this is an internal affair. But we very much would obviously like to see the international community stay engaged to assist these governments in their battle against extremism. In the case of Egypt, I think Americans want to see from President Mohamed Morsi a statement of regret and of apology for the fact that demonstrators were able to get inside the American embassy and to ransack the embassy, and a resolve that it will not happen again. We haven't seen the kind of statements from the Egyptian government that we've certainly seen from the Libyan government.
And so why do you think President Obama said that he does not believe that Egypt is an ally, but does not consider them an enemy? What does that statement mean?
Well, in diplomacy, an ally is a very specific term. It's used for treaty allies, countries with which you have a defense agreement. So, for instance, the United States has an allied relationship in NATO with 26 European countries, allied relationship with Japan and South Korea. We do not have allied relationships with any countries in the Middle East. Egypt's a friend of the United States. There's no question about that. Egypt and the United States have a lot, I think, common interests that they can pursue, but there are also differences between the new government and Washington. I think, obviously, that we ought to try to minimize the differences between us, resolve those that do exist. But if that's a two-way street, and in my view, President Obama has been a very good friend to Egypt. We're about to have a debt relief agreement where Washington would relieve a significant amount of debt that the Egyptian government will now not have to repay. The United States is a major contributor of economic and military assistance to Egypt. The United States has been, I think, quite open in supporting the process of democratization and a free and fair election in Egypt over the last year. So we do want to see the Egyptian government, obviously, uphold its end of this relationship, and first and foremost is protecting our diplomats. They have an obligation to do that.
Now, sir, there's obviously discord between the two nations. The dispute has even spilled over to Twitter. I'm going to read a couple of them, if you'll bear with me, where the U.S. Embassy in Cairo and the Muslim Brotherhood sparred on Thursday. It started when the Muslim Brotherhood's official account tweeted, "We are relieved that none of the U.S. Embassy Cairo staff were harmed and hope U.S.-Egyptian relations will sustain turbulence of Tuesday's events." The embassy replied to the Brotherhood, "Thanks, by the way, have you checked out your own Arabic feeds? I hope you read or know that we read those too." Not understanding the reference, the Brotherhood shot back, "We understand you're under a lot of stress, but it will be more helpful if you point out exactly the Arabic feed of concerns." It looks like the Egyptians might be saying different things in Arabic and English. Is this normal in the world of politics and diplomacy?
It is normal, even among the best of friends, to have disagreements. No one expects two countries to be in absolute conformity. But in a crisis situation, and we are all certainly in a crisis situation this week in the Middle East, I think it's not unreasonable to expect that the Egyptian government will stand up and implement its own commitments, not just to the United States, but to all countries that have embassies and consulates in its country. The Egyptian military is certainly strong enough to resist violent protesters who would break into a foreign country's embassy. The United States has an obligation in our own country to protect the Egyptian embassy in Washington and its consulates around our large country, and we do that. We uphold that obligation we have to Egypt. So I don't think it's unreasonable for us to ask that our diplomats be secure. We lost 4 of our diplomats in Libya this week. The Libyan government came out, the head of state, with a very strong, clear, unequivocal statement of regret, of apology, and of affirming to us that they would indeed protect our diplomatic establishments. So this is a basic element of diplomacy, and I think that all countries in a situation that we find ourselves in would act in the same way that we have acted, asking for support and protection.
Now, so people are protesting against the United States. The U.S. government has had nothing to do with the film in question. Have you anything to say to the protesters?
Well, all I would say is that I've followed this controversy quite closely, and of course, the United States government has nothing to do with this hateful film made in the United States. It is not a product of the United States. I would also say that nothing justifies violence. There is no justification for groups of people in Egypt or in Libya or in Yemen to engage in violent acts against the United States or any other country or against their own citizens. This is elementary, and I'm well aware because I've lived in Egypt and I've worked in the American Embassy in Cairo in the past, a long time ago. I know that the vast majority of Egyptians are fair-minded people, they're democratic people, and they wish the best for Egypt's relations with the United States. I know we're only dealing with a minority of people here, and that's why the Egyptian government really has the responsibility here to step up and to provide the security and the support that their friend needs at this time.
Ambassador, thank you for your time.